Welcome everyone. Inji Losar Tashi Delek. Happy New Year's, in other words, in Western style. So glad to see that you survived 2025 and you made it to join us here in 2026. I think for many people, there was a great sense of anxiety in the previous year. Many of us felt like things couldn't possibly get worse, especially if you're one of those individuals who's been targeted by all of the animosity that's going on in the world. Really, we can all see the direction we're headed in. We're going back to our old faults in the past. But you should never let this make you give in to despair or to give up, because things are impermanent, as I said previously. Now, if you haven't checked out Vinay Mehta's interview I did last night on New Year's Eve, I suggest you do. It was a lot of fun. And it'd be nice if you could boost his channel. He's a lovely guy and he's really sincere on the path. He brought something to my attention. That's Swami T made a video and he mentioned my non-dual zombie video that I did recently, which I thought was quite funny. So check that out. Part of the problem is, and why we feel such despair, is because of narratives. Now this is a big issue in general in the world. Basically everybody holds their own narrative and they see that to be more important than anybody else's. They see that to be the true one. That's what we all do. Of course we can be sold a narrative, we can appropriate one, we can adopt a view of the world given to us by someone else. But we all see our narrative, our particular way of seeing things, to be the way it is. What's important to us is the most important thing. But the problem is everybody has this way of thinking. Everybody's exactly the same in this regard. And so what happens is we end up coming into conflict with each other, because obviously our narratives aren't going to match. And what is the basis of these narratives? Well, it comes down to identification. So another issue is that the powers that be put a lot of time, effort and resources into trying to sell you a narrative, basically. And these days, that means the tech billionaires, the people with lots of, the oligarchs basically, people with lots of power and influence in the world. And we've got something new, it's called the attention economy, right? So everybody's just basically trying to grab your attention. That's what social media does. That's what, these things are all about. They're kind of indispensable to us, right? You've got your alarm clock on there, your calendar. That's how you communicate with people, through messaging. I mean, you don't even need to make phone calls anymore. You can do everything through WhatsApp, SMS, etc. It's got your entertainment on it, the movies you like. It keeps track of everything you like and it makes an algorithm. And in this way it becomes indispensable. And it's the primary source by which these oligarchs, etc., these mega corporations can grab your attention. And your attention is valuable. Even if you don't buy or purchase anything, then basically if your phone knows you're paying attention to it, and then they can sell that. It's kind of replacing what we used to have as advertisements, right? So most people don't watch TV anymore. It's like the Fox News generation, baby boomers. Linear cable television, those sorts of things, they don't really exist anymore. In the future, they won't. And so primarily it's through your devices. And this is how you're sold a narrative as well, right? And so we generally have this way of thinking in the new year. It's like we've gone past that year, 2025 is gone, and then we're entering into a new year, and now we want to try to do things better. We want to try to improve things. We're going to make resolutions, commitments for how we're going to act. This itself also is a narrative. Even the idea that there is such a thing as time is a narrative. Especially the idea that there is a repetition, that we return to winter. Actually, there is no returning to the past. And there is no future that we can experience. Really all we have is what we hold, is the present moment. And so what often happens is on New Year's Day, many people make a resolution. Like, oh, that was terrible. Last night I ate so much pizza and I drank so much beer and I feel absolutely sick. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to give up alcohol. But when we go back on our promises and we feel like we've failed, And we also feel like we can't recover from that. So we sabotage ourselves with this way of thinking. But like every moment is your new year. Every moment is what we call fresh and spontaneous. And if you're a Dharma practitioner, then that's primarily what you need to invest your time in, is recognizing that what we have is the now. It's what we call what is fresh, spontaneous. And so we have to do our best in every subsequent moment, every moment that exists, to do as best we can, to apply ourselves to virtue. And not worry about our past failures. It's like karma, cause and effect. Many Westerners have issues with that. They find it difficult. If they find that in order to believe karma, cause and effect, it's like you have to blame the victim or something like that. But that's not the point of the teachings on karma. The point of the teachings on karma is that your current actions lead to results. And basically what you did in the past, you can't really change. You can't undo what you did in the past. To some extent, you can purify your past actions, but in general, you're going to have to experience them. So it's not about blaming the victim. It's about, all right, you forget about that because there's nothing I can do about it. There's all kinds of things I did in the past and I don't even know what they are. At some point, they're going to manifest in terms of illness, etc. Other people engaging aggressively against me, etc. But those things we can't ultimately do anything about. And for example, if I fight against my enemies, that doesn't really solve the problem. That lays down new seeds for the future. And so once you have this way of thinking, then again, every moment is a new year. Every moment is fresh. And there's hope as well in that, because it doesn't depend on something you can't change like the past. And it also doesn't depend on an imagined future. This is often where we go wrong, is we imagine a future, one that we would prefer. We imagine a future that we can work towards. And that doesn't ever happen. We never arrive at the future. We only remain in the present. And so in general what we do is we make very fixed plans. Try to get the results we want. Then we work everything out meticulously. And what happens is that when things don't go exactly to our plan, then we feel like we've lost it all. Or we reject other possibilities and opportunities. This is something you should never do, especially if you're a practitioner. Then again, it's not like there are things you cannot change. You can change things in as much as you are responsible for what happens in the future in your experiences. And so you apply yourself now. I was talking about Vinay in this interview about the difference between the Indian way of thinking and the Western way of thinking. This is mainly due to an endemic belief in past and future lives and karma, cause and effect. And so they're less hung up about this issue. But as Westerners, we kind of feel like we get one chance only. That's because we basically believe that this life happened for no reason, spontaneously, randomly, and then when we're dead, it's finished. So we've got to kind of do everything. We've got to complete all our business before we die. But if you're a Dharma practitioner, if you have a kind of Vedic or Hindu way of thinking, then this is meaningless. Because we accept that we've had countless previous lifetimes. And also, until we achieve awakening, we will have countless lifetimes in the future. In fact, this is another narrative. The idea of past, present, and future is another narrative. We sort of contrive a story based on vague past memories, anticipations about the future, and kind of the things we experience in the current moment as being the most important thing. And because we have fabricated this timeline, then we get stuck. We can't imagine a world in which our narrative is mistaken. But really what we need is we need presence. So we need to be open in the moment to possibilities. And, it's even spiritual practitioners fall into this trap. Because their narrative, one is like, I'm going to practice as an ascetic. I'm going to become a monk and keep my vows. And then when we fail in that story, then we can't handle it. We feel like there's no way to repair it. Somehow we've lost our purity. But purity is here, right now. The new year is here right now, and it's also here tomorrow, January 2nd and 3rd and 4th. Every moment, when you go to sleep, when you wake up, There's that openness and that opportunity. And it's difficult to understand why this is the case, but our recent discoveries in science have also given us some kind of insight into this. For example, this idea about the quantum reality, a reality in which things aren't exactly fixed. This is really important to understand. Our classical physics, for example, heavily lean towards a deterministic universe. You know, if you put a certain amount of impelling force into something, you can predict where it's going to be, even if it's trillions of years into the future. But this broke down around 100 years ago, you know, with Niels Bohr and Einstein, etc. What we've discovered is that the world we thought was fixed in some way, was deterministic in some ways, actually kind of lacks identity. It's not random, but it lacks fixed identity. And this is also what the Buddha taught. You can still hear fireworks going on. I have to tell you something. I never realized how crazy the Germans were, because I mean, as you know, I'm here in Germany. I'm doing a retreat next month, and they absolutely go crazy with fireworks. Last night they started the fireworks about 11 o'clock at night, and then after midnight it went on till 1 or 2 in the morning. It was just continuous, and it was all people letting off their own fireworks. It's some kind of pagan thing. It's absolutely nuts. So we have to be careful about being wrapped up in this narrative. And the primary source, or the fundamental, the foundational source of this narrative is a belief in me and mine. An idea of having a fixed identity. And this is where we suffer, right? Because when we don't achieve our goals, then we feel like we've let ourselves down and we become despondent. And especially if you're suffering from ADHD, etc., then, or if you've got difficulties with your executive function, then when this happens, it will cripple you. And so you mustn't do that. You have to kind of realize that there's potential in every moment. I mean, this is the quantum reality. Things like quantum particles, we conceptually think of them existing in multiple states at the same time. This just shows us that every moment is a moment of possibility. And that arrow can go towards progress, benefit, or it can go in the opposite direction. Also, you can just waste your time and stay the same. This time wasting is a really big issue in the West, and especially because we have a very nihilistic way of thinking. Then we just think, well, what does it matter? I'm just going to distract myself. Again, with this kind of thing, social media. And this just empowers the oligarchs, the media companies, tech billionaires, because then we have no life of our own. Really, there's a whole amazing world out there. There's so much to be of awe in the world, even if we don't have all this stuff we rely on, all this technology. I was walking by a very beautiful lake in Bavaria here today, and it's just amazing what people achieved hundreds of years ago, before we had motor cars and steam engines and these sorts of things, computers. The kind of beauty and splendor they were able to create just out of their inspiration. And they also had a very kind of long-reaching view. I think this is the case if you go into Nepal and India. They still have this. In the West, we've kind of lost it. It's really tragic, really, because, for example, my grandfather's generation saw huge changes in the world. They saw changes from basically living in an environment where you had horse and cart to humans landing on the moon in their lifetime. But for them, if you go back previously, before the Industrial Revolution, then people had a very long-term view. For example, they would plant oak trees, because the wood is very good, right? They would plant these oak trees along the boulevards, because they can't plant them in the fields because they need to plant crops. But also, when they want to harvest that tree, they want to have it near a road so they can drag it with horses and they can bring it to the mill. But these trees, they take like hundreds of years to grow. So when you plant a tree and you think, well, in my great-grandchildren's generation, they might be able to get something out of this. We don't think like that anymore. Our world is very nihilistic and very sort of ephemeral, and not in a good way. It's just like we have nothing that we can hold on to. For example, this notion of eternal progress towards virtuous goals. So nihilism is really difficult, and it's especially difficult for the young these days because they've never known anything different. For them, it's just continuous change. I'm a bit older, so I've been able to see this in my own lifetime. But I remember seeing some young kid, 17-year-old, something like that, and and uh, and they'd ask me what music I was into or something like that, and I said I was a musician, but I was a bit too young to be a punk rocker, which is true. I was kind of, when I was 18, it was sort of the era of goth, etc. It was a long time ago now, but they said, "Oh no, I'm a punk rocker." So what's happening is we've got all these cultural fads and things, and they're just recycling themselves, right? They're just rehashing things. This also happened in the past. They had, for example, this Art Deco movement, and that was like recycled in the 50s. And then the naturalist movement was recycled in the 70s, and these would just go around in circles. But these days, it's going faster and faster and faster. And what the Buddha taught essentially is that this is all meaningless. You know, if you're like the king of the universe in one lifetime, and then you're the most destitute, impoverished beggar the next lifetime, or you have to suffer torture and pain in the lower realms, then there is no point. This is what the Buddha taught to his own half-brother, who was very attached to pleasures of the senses. Essentially, that these things are meaningless, because at one moment you'll have temporary pleasure, and then later it will be gone, and you'll have to experience suffering. For many people, spirituality is just about like, yeah, okay, I'm just in it for the ride. And, you know, if you have the true non-dual view, then you don't have anything to change. But quite clearly for us, then there are issues, there are problems. And everything isn't just okay the way it is. I mean, if you're fine with whatever happens, that's great, if you've got that kind of level of practice. But there's no point in kidding yourself on. That's how you become a non-dual zombie. Kidding yourself on that you have a very high spiritual view when somebody comes along and just says something nasty to you, and you're in the dumps, you get upset. But it's just a sign, right? And you haven't realized this view. Ultimately, we need to be able to overcome all of our narratives. But as I've said previously, in the interim, what we need to do is we have to have a provisional, like a temporary, virtuous narrative. And that's mostly what the spiritual path is all about, and religion as well. You know, of course it can go wrong, but what we're doing is essentially, we're creating a better narrative. I mean, look at the tantric practices, the deity union practices, where we create these mandalas of deities in union with all kinds of arms and heads and things. This is just alternative narratives. And eventually these narratives as well need to be abandoned. But you can't just start off by abandoning all narratives. You can't just come onto the spiritual path and hear, oh yeah, there's no good, bad, everything's great, and just lie in the middle of the street, you know, like a crazy person. It's not going to work. It's not going to make you happy. Eventually you'll realize that you're fooling yourself, and then you'll be worse off. This also happens in kind of more conventional terms in the spiritual path. People are inspired to practice Buddhism, and then they read stories about the ascetics and the monks, and they just think, okay, I'm going to give everything up, right? They give their house away, give all their clothes away, they go and practice. And after a few years, they suddenly realize that they're not getting anywhere, and they were a bit premature in doing that, and then they regret it. And they come back to the world and they've got nothing. So you have to be clever on the path, and you mustn't deceive yourself. There's a lot of really appealing kind of tasty narratives out there. Like the one that's predominant in North America, especially in the United States, is anybody can become the richest man in the world. And so everybody's killing themselves for material gain to try to get rich. But there's spiritual narratives as well. For example, well, if you just become a monk or a nun, you're going to be happy. You know, it's not really depending on what you do on the outside, what clothes you wear, you know, how you identify. That's not going to bring you happiness, ultimately. If you're going to have ultimate happiness, it can't be dependent on external things. And then when I say external things, or phenomena, let's say, I also mean internal phenomena, ideas, concepts, view, that sort of thing. These also ultimately have to be abandoned. If your meditation is dependent on something, then it will fail. So you hear many people, and they think that meditation is some state of consciousness that they find in their mind. So, for example, they'll go through a guided meditation, and they're instructed to look in a particular way, sort of turn your awareness towards mind itself, and then you'll have this moment, and then they grasp onto that as the object of their meditation. And the problem is that there's a contradiction there. There's an internal contradiction there, because the view is that the kleshas, negative emotions themselves, are wisdom, right? All phenomena are eternally pure. So if there's this single separate thing that you need to cultivate in order to have meditation, then that contradicts the narrative that actually every moment is purity. So, and then there's no point in trying to deceive yourself that you understand that. Because usually what will happen is that you'll just get a wrong idea. And what you'll do is you'll stitch that view into your own narrative. So people who like, for example, taking drugs and partying, and then they hear the spiritual words, everything is pure, the negative emotions are wisdom, and then they'll just think, well, that's great, I've got a permission structure to do what I like. But that permission structure to do what I like is based on me having strong preferences. As I've said before many times, then when we hear everything's perfectly pure, there's no good or bad, we don't think, oh great, I'll eat shit, right? What we think is, oh great, I can go to the pub and get drunk, or I can take some drugs. So we immediately go to those things that we're attracted to. And that's because we have preferences. And it's okay if you've got preferences, that's not a problem, right? You have to recognize, be humble, recognize that you're an ordinary person. This is a point that always jumps out to my mind, is that for these Asian practitioners, and very few of them think they're actually practicing authentically. Their way of thinking is more like, oh, this is a really wonderful thing. It's so auspicious. Of course, I could never do it. But if I make a connection, then maybe in future lifetimes things will work out right. But most Westerners, when they come to the path, it's like, okay, now I'm going to be like Milarepa. I'm going to, give up all my possessions and go live in a cave with no food and meditate for 40 years. And they get it 6 months into that, and then they regret it. So it's going to sabotage yourself. So what's the message for the new year? Well, one thing, do your best to forget about all this shit. On there's just the news and everything like that. It just makes the world more polarized. It's just one side trying to sell their story, another side trying to sell their story. Basically, it's good to stand up for people you think are being mistreated, denigrated. It's great. It's also, don't think, well, there's no narratives, therefore I won't give charity to people in Gaza. But you also don't want to get totally wrapped up into it, because everyone has their agendas, right? Everybody is trying to push their narrative. And if you try to follow this, you just end up getting a headache. You're just going to end up spinning around like in a washing machine in samsara. What you need to do is find your own inner peace. And worrying too much about what's going on in the news, what people are pushing on X and these social media platforms, isn't going to help that. It's just going to make you feel like you don't know if you're coming or going, like you're seasick, something like that. And this is the technique that the autocrats use. They do this intentionally to take away your power. I mean, this is what Vladimir Putin's been doing to his own people. They have this narrative like Russians are so strong, best nation in the world, but really they're a nation of serfs, vassals, and they're under the thumb of a dictator. And how he keeps the people down is by feeding them all kinds of contradictory narratives, so they don't know whether they're coming or going. They don't know what's true anymore. And the same thing is coming to the West, and it's happening all over the place, here in Germany, in Britain, Canada, and America. And what happens is then you go out into the world, and then people have very extreme views that you may not agree with, but you immediately feel like, well, I can't get involved in that conversation because it's going to start a fight. And everybody's in the same position. It's like 1984. And what we need is for people to find their own center. Because those people who develop some spiritual qualities, who have a center, then they become like a life ring, a life raft for others. Somebody who has stability that others can rely on to help them not get upset. And you'll know this yourself. If you go into a situation and somebody starts to panic, that if other people get involved in that process of anxiety and panic, then the whole thing just gets out of control. And if there's a strong person, a stable person there, then they can help those people. It's a bit like an adult with children, right? If they're getting upset, they can calm them down. And that's really what we need in the world these days, is people who have some spiritual, mental stability, and then they can be shining lights or beacons to others. And primarily this is based around holding this narrative of benefiting others, altruism, really important. And so whatever social media that you follow, whatever narratives you're reading into, then always look for some important things within what's going on, right? For example, okay, that person is doing something really bad. I can't accept that. But if my solution is to kill them, then that contradicts the very kind of foundation of the spiritual path, which is altruism. What we should do is have compassion for these individuals. For example, there's somebody like Elon Musk, and half the people think, "Wow, he's like an enlightened being from another planet who's come to save our Earth," or something like that. Many people believe this, and other people think, "Well, he's a demon," that sort of thing. But if more people thought, "Well, he's just an ordinary person, he's actually really mixed up, and I feel sorry for the guy," then a lot of that power comes out of that individual. They don't have the power to control us anymore. If you think there's somebody who needs help, right? Well, the problem is we're so materialistic. We immediately think if somebody has power or money, then somehow they're better than everyone else. And this isn't the case. If you understand the Buddhist narrative, then this is just a consequence of something they did in the past. It may not reflect at all on who they are in this current moment. This is a big problem that people have with karma, cause, and effect, because you see really evil people who are very, very rich and powerful. And you think, if karma works, then how are these people so wealthy and powerful? But karma, cause, and effect is based on a belief in this beginningless time and cyclic existence, right? So it's not just like time started at one point and then we've had many, many, many lifetimes and now we're experiencing our karma consequences. Really, the truth is that we're at the center of time. And then every possible iteration of who we are, what we can do, is present right now. These are multiverses, and they all manifest, and it all manifests out of intention and thought. And so as spiritual practitioners, what we need to do is have some control over our mind, not get carried away by narratives, which are essentially fueled by our negative tendencies, and those themselves are fueled by our self-identification. Me, mine, these sorts of things. And so we need that. But we also need to work with these provisional positive narratives. And there's certain things, right? For example, to have compassion and love for all beings, not to engage in negativity. So we have to control our mind. We have to do our best to act in a virtuous manner, and also do everything we can to avoid negativity. And have a long-term view. It's not like if you make a New Year's resolution today and tomorrow you have a drink and you fall back and then it's over, you're finished. Every day is a new day, and you just keep trying your best. And also be humble. I'm just an ordinary being. I may fail, but eventually I'll get there. And you have to keep those important foundational values in mind all the time, right? It's okay to point out the faults in others. Like, for example, you can say, well, I don't like what the Israeli government's doing to people in Gaza. It doesn't make you an anti-Semite. But if you turn that into anti-Semitism or hatred for a race or for a people, then you've gone wrong. Also, if you're getting triggered, angry, then it's not going to help the situation. You need to have some time out. You need to find your center. You need to go sit and meditate for a bit so that you're more calm. And then you can kind of face the situation with better ability, with better tools to deal with it. But as soon as you get emotional, get carried away, then you're finished. It's because we're ordinary beings and we have bad habits. And we have to do our best to undo these bad habits. And don't worry so much about being able to liberate all sentient beings or make the world a better place. That comes later. First, we have to look in the mirror. First look at who you are and make yourself a decent human being, right? You can't be a mess, traumatized, completely out of control, and then think about helping all sentient beings. You are also a sentient being, so you've got to help yourself first. And then once you get on stable ground, and once you start to develop some spiritual knowledge and some spiritual qualities, and then you will spontaneously be able to help others. Because others will see you and see the benefits of the way you are, and that will inspire them to change their own lives. And also, we don't want to feed into all these narratives. The more fuel we put on the fire, the worse it just gets, right? Sure, what Israel has been doing in Gaza is absolutely terrible, but going out and firebombing places, using Molotov cocktails is not going to make the situation better. We need the voice of reason. And you need to communicate with people as human beings. They are confused, as we all are. Some people are more confused than others, but essentially we all possess what's called the Buddha nature. And nothing is permanent. Like in theistic religions, mostly they say, well, if you fail, then you're going to hell and that's it for the rest of eternity. It's not like that in Buddhism. We've all done the worst things imaginable. We've been in hell. We've done worse things than Adolf Hitler. We've done worse things than Donald Trump. And we got over it, and then we moved on. But we've been doing this. Sometimes we're better, sometimes we're worse. And it just goes on and on and on and on. We've got to get off the wheel of samsara. And unfortunately, we don't know what that means, right? It's not like the New Age Veda people are saying, there's no work to do, no meditation to do. We've got work to do, 100%. And the place to start is, first, things aren't right the way they are. They can be better, right? You have to do that first, and then you've got everything. Then you have to start applying yourself to this alternative but positive narrative. And whether you believe it or not, I don't know. But as it teaches in the Mahayana, then the kind of most infallible way to proceed forward is to develop something called bodhicitta. And essentially what bodhicitta is, loving kindness and compassion. That is without discrimination. It's loving kindness and compassion that's enacted for all sentient beings equally, with no favoritism. And it takes a long time to get there, but that's kind of the start of the journey. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say today. And I hope you have an absolutely wonderful 2026. We've got a lot of plans with the Insight Sangha for new retreats. And the first one will be this winter retreat here in Germany, in a beautiful Bavarian town called Geltendorf. It's only a weekend retreat, but we have to start somewhere. And then in spring, the first week in June, we're going to have our very first retreat on our own property at the Drolling Discovery Hermitage in BC. And so the information for that is already on the website. And if you want to apply, then apply early because there's a limited amount of spaces. And hopefully then we'll be able to do a Karma Yoga retreat in the autumn, which will involve trying to convert an old boat shed into a meditation hall and build an organic garden. So lots of exciting things for the future. Always have hope, always have enthusiasm, and remain open and spontaneous. So when those opportunities come by, for example, you meet a new person, don't just turn away in fear of who they might be, but be open to the fact that this might be somebody important in your life or somebody you could help. And in this way, you hopefully will get rid of your fear and your anxiety and also find some new direction and hope and enthusiasm for the future. So until next time, see you later.